Clara had been craving silence for weeks. Her life in Boston had become a blur of meetings, phone calls, and crowded streets where no one noticed her existence beyond a nod or a smile. She felt worn out, like a candle burning at both ends. Every evening she returned to her apartment with a heavy chest and a restless mind, longing for a place where she could simply breathe without obligation. The thought of being alone was no longer a desire but a need. And when her boss suggested she take a weekend off, Clara seized the chance immediately. She remembered her aunt's small cabin by a secluded lake, a place untouched by tourists and city noise, and decided it would be perfect. She packed her bag quickly, choosing comfortable clothes, a journal, and a few books she never had time to read. The drive north was long but refreshing. With each mile, she felt the weight of the city dissolve behind her, replaced by the smell of pine and the hint of water in the air. She arrived just before sunset. The cabin, small but charming, sat at the edge of the lake, its windows reflecting the soft pinks and oranges of the evening sky. Clara stepped out of the car, stretching her arms as she inhaled deeply, feeling the tension in her shoulders begin to release. She walked around the property, noting the little details: a rocking chair on the porch, a small garden overgrown with wildflowers, and the gentle ripple of water against the shore. Everything was quiet, peaceful, and exactly what she needed as she entered the cabin. The familiar scent of wood and earth filled her senses. She unpacked quickly, placing her belongings in neat stacks and arranging the few items she had brought. Clara set her books on a small shelf, poured herself a cup of tea, and walked to the window overlooking the lake. Sitting down, she opened the first book she picked up, eager to immerse herself in a story that had waited too long. The soft hum of the wind in the trees and the distant call of a bird created a perfect backdrop for her solitude. She felt her chest relax, her heartbeat steady, as if the quiet itself had a gentle rhythm she could match. Clara allowed herself to sink into the moment, letting go of every worry, every responsibility that had followed her from the city. She felt a rare and beautiful sense of freedom. But then, just as she was settling completely, a flicker in the corner of her vision made her pause. Clara turned her head sharply, expecting maybe a branch swaying in the breeze or a small animal. But there was nothing. She rubbed her eyes and looked again. The shadows in the forest beyond the cabin seemed slightly darker, deeper than before. Her pulse quickened, though not out of fear, more out of an unfamiliar alertness. She tried to convince herself it was nothing. The wind, the setting sun, the way shadows stretched across the ground, they could all trick the eye. She sipped her tea and focused on her book, but the feeling lingered. Something about the stillness felt. Watched later, Clara decided to step outside. She needed fresh air, a reason to move, to remind herself that this was her sanctuary. The sky was now a soft purple, and the lake mirrored the fading light perfectly. She walked along the small path leading to the water, listening to the leaves crunch beneath her boots. With each step, the quiet pressed around her, soothing yet strangely intense. Clara paused to look across the lake, letting her eyes follow the distant tree line. That's when she noticed Ida movement near the far edge of the clearing. At first she thought it might be another deer or some other wildlife, but it didn't move like an animal. It seemed deliberate, almost human. Her heart beat faster, a mixture of surprise and curiosity taking hold. She strained her eyes, but the figure disappeared before she could see clearly. Clara returned to the cabin, unsettled yet intrigued. She tried to brush off the feeling, telling herself she was overreacting. But even as she sat by the window again, sipping her tea and reading her book, she could not shake the sense that someone or something was quietly present, observing her solitude. The idea was both disturbing and oddly comforting. She thought about how long it had been since she had felt completely alone, yet not lonely. She had wanted solitude, and she had it. But now it came with an unspoken presence she couldn't ignore. That night, Clara lit a small lamp, the warm glow filling the cabin. She moved closer to the window to watch the stars begin to appear, their reflection rippling in the lake. Every sound, the rustle of leaves, the distant call of an owl felt amplified. Yet intimate, like the forest itself was alive and breathing with her. She felt a shiver of anticipation mixed with calm. realizing that this quiet weekend might be different from what she had imagined. Perhaps solitude was never just about being physically alone, but about being open to noticing what or who might exist in the spaces we leave empty. As she lay in bed later, staring at the wooden ceiling, Clara's mind wandered through memories of her hectic life. The laughter she missed, the conversations she never had, the quiet moments of longing she pushed aside. The cabin, the lake, the forest, it was a place to feel all of that without judgment. She closed her eyes, trying to surrender completely to rest. But a small thought kept her awake. Someone might already be here, nearby, quietly noticing her, sharing her solitude in a way she could not yet understand. It was a strange feeling, both unsettling and strangely tender, and it made her heart beat in a way that reminded her of hope she hadn't felt in months. By the early hours of the morning, Clara drifted into a restless sleep, wrapped in the quiet she had longed for, yet aware that she was not entirely alone. The shadow of something or someone hovered at the edges of her mind, teasing the promise of connection in a weekend meant for solitude. And somewhere deep inside, she realized that this unexpected presence might change everything she thought she wanted, even before she met it face to face. This is a fast-paced, 1,000-word expansion of Part 1, keeping it emotional, clean, and fully YouTube-monetization-safe. If you want, I can now expand Part 2 in the same style, keeping the story flowing and emotionally engaging. Do you want me to do that next? Clara woke the next morning to the soft glow of sunlight spilling through the cabin window. The air smelled of damp earth and pine, a fresh reminder that she was far from the chaos of Boston. She stretched and took a deep breath, feeling a quiet excitement for the day ahead. After a quick breakfast of toast and tea, she decided to explore the area around the lake. The path winding through the trees promised solitude, but it also invited discovery, and she was eager for both. Her boots crunched against the fallen leaves as she walked, the forest alive with morning sounds, birds chirping, branches swaying, and the distant splash of water against the shore. Clara felt herself relax, the tension in her shoulders melting with each step. She realized she hadn't experienced a moment so completely peaceful in months, and it gave her a quiet sense of joy she hadn't known she was missing as she followed the narrow trail along the lake. Clara noticed the way sunlight filtered through the branches, creating patterns on the ground like a delicate dance of light and shadow. She paused to take in the beauty, letting her eyes wander over the sparkling water, the green canopy above, and the distant hills. Then something unusual caught her attention. Across a small clearing, partially hidden by trees, sat a man. He appeared to be in his mid-30s, with soft brown hair and calm, observing eyes. He was seated on a fallen log, looking in her direction, yet not in a threatening way. For a moment, Clara froze, unsure if he was part of her imagination or real. Her heart beat faster, a strange combination of surprise, curiosity, and caution flooding her senses. The man didn't move as if startled. He simply observed as if the world had slowed down just for them to exist in that moment. Clara took a cautious step forward and gave a polite wave, expecting a polite nod in return. Instead, he smiled softly, an expression that felt both familiar and comforting, though she could not place him. Before she could approach further, he quietly stood and disappeared into the trees, leaving her standing in the clearing with her pulse racing and questions filling her mind. She shook it off, telling herself it was probably another visitor or a local enjoying the morning air. Yet deep down, she couldn't ignore the strange sense of connection she had felt, the impression that someone had been quietly sharing her solitude without disturbing it. She continued her walk along the lake, but the memory of the man lingered like a soft echo, a presence she couldn't shake. Clara's mind wandered as she walked, thinking about how rare it was to encounter someone who seemed to notice her without intruding. In Boston, people rarely looked, rarely paused. Here, in the quiet of the forest, she felt seen, even if only for a fleeting moment. She thought about how long she had been craving someone who could share silence rather than conversation, someone who could simply exist alongside her without needing to fill the space with noise. The thought made her chest tighten in a way that was unexpected, an unfamiliar but gentle ache of longing. The path led her to a small wooden dock at the edge of the lake, where she paused to watch the water ripple in the morning breeze. She noticed the reflection of trees in the water and how the sunlight shimmered on the surface, creating patterns that made her feel as though the lake itself was alive. Breathing with her dot as she stood there, Clara felt movement in the corner of her eye again. A small animal darted behind a bush, and for a moment she held her breath, half expecting it to be the man returning. But it wasn't. Still, the sense of being watched, of not truly being alone, remained. She decided to take a different trail, winding further into the forest, hoping the walk would clear her mind and give her clarity. The trail narrowed and the trees grew taller and denser, creating a canopy that filtered the sunlight into delicate beams. She breathed deeply, filling her lungs with the crisp forest air, and felt her mind opening, becoming lighter. Each step seemed to carry her further from her worries, yet closer to the mysterious presence that lingered just beyond her awareness. By late morning, Clara found a small clearing with a bench facing the lake. She sat down, letting her hands rest on her knees, her eyes scanning the water and the distant tree line. She tried to convince herself that the man had been an accident. Coincidence? Something her imagination had conjured in the solitude she had longed for. Yet every time she closed her eyes, she saw his calm, observing face. And it left a warm sensation in her chest, a mixture of curiosity and gentle longing. She wondered who he was, why he had been there, and if she might see him again. The questions filled her mind, but rather than anxiety, they brought a quiet excitement, a subtle anticipation that tingled beneath her skin. Lunch was simple. Just a sandwich and a bottle of water eaten on the bench while she watched the sunlight dance on the lake. Clara noticed the ripples moving toward the shore. Small waves colliding with rocks and twigs, each sound amplified in the stillness. She realized that the quiet had a rhythm of its own, a pulse that mirrored her thoughts and emotions. She felt a gentle melancholy mixed with hope, as if the forest had opened a space for her heart to feel freely again. The memory of the man lingered in her mind, and she began to feel a strange comfort in the idea that someone might be nearby, quietly sharing the same space without intrusion. It was a sensation she had never experienced before, being noticed without being interrupted, being observed without judgment. As afternoon approached, Clara wandered toward a hidden cove she had seen from the dock. The path was narrow, and the underbrush brushed against her legs. But she pushed forward, drawn by a mixture of curiosity and the desire for more solitude. When she reached the cove, the lake opened up before her, wide and calm, reflecting the sky in soft blues and whites. She knelt at the water's edge, dipping her fingers in, feeling the cold ripple against her skin. The sense of peace was nearly overwhelming, and for a moment, she let herself imagine that the world could always be this quiet, this simple, this full of small, perfect moments. Then, a faint sound reached her ears, a rustle of leaves from the opposite side of the cove. Clara froze, unsure if it was the wind or someone approaching. She slowly turned, and through the trees she caught a glimpse of the man again. He stood just at the edge, partially hidden, his gaze fixed on her. She felt a mix of surprise, curiosity, and a strange sense of relief. He didn't step forward or speak. He merely watched calmly, as if he were waiting for permission to enter her world. Clara's heart fluttered. For the first time in years, she didn't feel alone in the way that hurt. Someone had entered her quiet without breaking it. As the sun began to lower toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the lake, Clara realized that her weekend of solitude was no longer entirely hers. She had come seeking space from the world, but now she felt the gentle presence of another soul nearby, someone who seemed to understand the quiet she craved. She wondered if this was what it meant to be truly seen, not just noticed, but recognized in the stillness of your own heart. By evening, Clara returned to the cabin, her thoughts a whirlwind of questions and emotions. She prepared a simple dinner, all the while aware that someone had been there in the forest, watching, yet not intruding. The thought was unsettling at first, but it slowly transformed into a feeling of warmth. a reminder that connection could exist even in unexpected places. Sitting by the window with the soft glow of the lamp reflecting on the lake, Clara allowed herself to imagine the possibility of meeting him again, sharing conversation, or simply enjoying silence together. The idea made her chest tighten in a pleasant way, a gentle mix of anticipation and hope she hadn't felt in years. As she prepared for bed, Clara reflected on the day. She had walked, explored, and discovered more than just the beauty of the forest. She had discovered the stirring of her own heart, the quiet longing for connection, and the awareness that sometimes solitude is not about being alone, but about opening yourself to the possibility of someone entering your world. The man's presence, fleeting yet profound, had shifted the weekend from an escape into a subtle awakening. Clara drifted into sleep with a calm excitement, her thoughts lingering on the mysterious figure she had seen, wondering who he was and what role he might play in the quiet story. Her life was beginning to write. This is part 2, expanded to 1,000 words. Fast-paced, emotionally engaging, clean, and fully YouTube-monetization-safe. If you want, I can now expand part 3 in the same style, keeping the romantic tension and gentle hooks. Do you want me to continue? Clara woke early on the third day of her retreat, sunlight spilling through the cabin windows and casting golden streaks across the wooden floor. The forest outside was quiet, but a live bird sang in soft harmony, and the leaves shimmered with dew. She decided to take the canoe out onto the lake before breakfast, wanting to feel the water's cool embrace and the freedom of being surrounded by nothing but nature. The canoe rocked gently as she pushed off from the shore, and for a moment she allowed herself to forget everything else: emails, responsibilities, deadlines. Simply float. The water reflected the morning sky in perfect clarity, and Clara felt a rare sense of peace she had almost forgotten existed as she paddled. She noticed the soft mist rising from the lake, curling around the trees like a delicate veil. The lake seemed endless, stretching out in every direction, and Clara felt as though she could lose herself in its quiet beauty forever. She let the canoe drift slowly, enjoying the rhythm of the water lapping against the sides, the occasional splash of a fish jumping, the distant call of a loon. It was exactly the solitude she had been searching for, a chance to breathe deeply and let her mind wander freely. Yet even in this peaceful moment, she sensed something or someone nearby. She couldn't see anyone, and there was no sound except nature. But the feeling of being observed lingered, gentle yet unmistakable. A sudden splash behind the canoe made Clara sit upright, her heart racing for a moment. She scanned the water and the tree line, her mind alert. Then she saw him, the man from the forest. He stood at the edge of the dock, holding a small wooden box in his hands, his calm brown eyes meeting hers across the distance. Clara's pulse quickened, a mixture of surprise, curiosity, and something she hadn't felt in a long time, a flutter of excitement. He smiled softly, and this time there was no hesitation or disappearance. He stayed, quiet and patient, giving her the choice to approach or retreat. Clara felt a sudden warmth spread through her chest, a recognition that she had been waiting, even unknowingly. "For this very moment. I didn't mean to startle you," he said as she paddled closer, his voice gentle and inviting. "I've been coming here for years. I thought maybe I could keep you company." Clara blinked, surprised by the candidness, yet strangely comforted by it. She realized that, despite the mystery, there was a familiarity in his calm demeanor, a sense of safety that made her heart slow in an unaccustomed way. She nodded, unsure what else to say, and guided the canoe toward the dock where he waited. As she tied the canoe, he placed the wooden box gently beside him on the planks, his presence steady and non-intrusive. They walked together along the path that led back to a small clearing by the lake. The air smelled fresh, earthy, and full of promise. Clara found herself talking easily, words spilling out as if the forest itself had given her courage. She spoke of her hectic life, her longed-for solitude, and the little joys she rarely allowed herself to notice. The man listened intently, never interrupting, offering only soft nods and small smiles that made her feel truly seen. "I'm Ethan," he finally said, breaking a comfortable silence. Clara smiled, repeating her name, feeling an unexpected connection spark between them. The conversation flowed naturally, covering favorite books, childhood memories, and dreams yet to be realized. Every word felt significant, yet light, as if they were speaking not to impress, but to simply share their worlds. The afternoon passed unnoticed. They wandered through the trees together, the soft crunch of leaves beneath their feet marking their path. The lake sparkled beside them, reflecting the changing sky, and the forest seemed to embrace their quiet companionship. Clara noticed how easy it felt to be near him, how the earlier feeling of being watched had transformed into a sense of being understood. There was no rush, no pressure, just presence, a shared calm that she had never experienced with anyone before. Occasionally, Ethan would point out a bird or a ripple in the water, his gestures gentle, inviting her to notice the world with him rather than simply passing through it alone. When they returned to the cabin area, Clara felt a rare sense of gratitude. The weekend that had begun as an escape from everyone and everything had turned into a subtle awakening. She realized that solitude could coexist with connection, that sharing quiet moments with the right person did not diminish the peace she had sought, but enhanced it. Ethan did not intrude. He simply existed alongside her, patient and kind, creating a space where her heart could feel again without fear or expectation. Clara's mind wandered to the small wooden box he had carried, wondering what it contained, but she trusted that its purpose would reveal itself in time. Just as their connection had as evening approached, they found a spot by the lake where the water was calm, reflecting the sky in soft shades of gold and pink. They sat on a fallen log, their shoulders brushing occasionally, a warmth passing between them that was quiet but undeniable. The conversation grew softer, punctuated by comfortable silences where no words were needed. Clara felt her heart open in ways she hadn't anticipated. For years, she had chased solitude to escape the noise of life. But now she realized that some forms of connection could bring peace instead of chaos. She could feel a slow, steady pulse of trust growing between them, fragile yet resilient, like the ripples on the lake. Night fell and the sky became a deep velvet scattered with stars. Clara and Ethan remained seated by the water, wrapped in the quiet intimacy of shared space. She felt a sense of belonging she had not known in a long time. A subtle reminder that human connection need not be loud or demanding to be profound. The wooden box sat beside him unopened, a symbol of patience, mystery, and the promise of more to come. Clara realized that sometimes life placed people in the right place at the right time, not forcefully, but gently, allowing hearts to recognize each other in the quiet before partying for the night. Ethan stood and offered a small, reassuring smile. "Tomorrow," he said, "there's more to see if you're willing." Clara nodded, a flutter of anticipation in her chest. She returned to the cabin, her steps lighter, her mind full of new possibilities. For the first time in years, she felt a mix of excitement and contentment, knowing that solitude and companionship could coexist, that moments of unexpected connection could bring clarity, warmth, and hope. Lying in bed that night, Clara reflected on the day. She had come to the lake seeking peace and quiet. Yet she had found something far more profound, a shared understanding, a gentle presence, and the possibility of romance unfolding slowly, naturally, and respectfully. Her heart was no longer heavy with the exhaustion of city life. Instead, it was light, tender, and open. The awareness of Ethan's presence lingered like a soft glow, a reminder that life often delivers the connections we need most when we least expect them. Clara drifted into a deep, restorative sleep, the lake and the forest outside whispering promises of tomorrow, of shared moments, and of a quiet growing bond that had begun to blossom in the simplest, most natural way. This is part 3 expanded to 1,000 words. Fast-paced, emotionally engaging, clean. and fully YouTube-monetization-safe. I can now expand part 4 in the same style, giving a satisfying romantic and emotional conclusion. Do you want me to do that next? Clara woke on the final morning of her weekend retreat with a bittersweet feeling in her chest. The sun filtered gently through the cabin windows, painting the wooden floor in warm golden hues. She stretched and listened to the forest outside, alive with morning sounds, the whisper of the wind through the trees, birds greeting the day, and the distant lapping of the lake. She knew today she would have to leave, return to Boston and the life she had temporarily escaped. But the thought of departure made her pulse quicken in a mixture of sadness and anticipation. For the first time, she felt the weight of connection in her solitude, a quiet, tender ache that was both grounding and thrilling. She prepared herself for the day with quiet efficiency, packing her bag and making sure the cabin was left as she had found it. Orderly and peaceful, Clara stepped outside for one last walk along the lake, needing to drink in the serenity that had nurtured her over the past days. The mist hung low over the water, curling around the reeds and rocks, creating an almost magical atmosphere. She let her eyes follow the reflections of the trees in the lake, her heart filled with gratitude for the peace she had found here. As she walked, she thought about Ethan, the man who had quietly entered her life and shared these quiet, perfect moments with her. She wondered where he was, if he was watching the sunrise as she was, and the thought made her chest flutter. For days she had sought solitude, yet she now realized that being completely alone was not always what her heart truly needed. Turning a corner, Clara spotted Ethan waiting by the water's edge as if he had known where she would be. He stood with his hands in his pockets, his calm brown eyes meeting hers, and his soft smile warmed her in ways she could not have anticipated. She walked toward him, her steps light but purposeful, and he straightened slightly, greeting her with a quiet, reassuring presence. "Good morning," he said, his voice gentle and steady. Clara returned the greeting, feeling an unspoken understanding pass between them. There were no questions, no unnecessary words, just a shared acknowledgement of the moments they had spent together, and the bond that had quietly formed in the spaces between silence and conversation. They walked together along the shoreline, each step measured and calm, letting the soft crunch of leaves beneath their feet and the gentle splash of water against the rocks fill the quiet spaces. Clara found herself talking freely, recounting her experiences in Boston, the exhaustion she had felt, and the relief she had discovered in this simple retreat. Ethan listened, offering small nods and encouraging smiles, never interrupting, never trying to force words where none were needed. His presence was grounding, a gentle anchor in the stillness. And Clara felt a warmth in her chest she had not realized she had been missing. She recognized that this weekend had shifted something within her, had opened a space in her heart that had been closed for far too long. As they reached a small clearing near the dock, the sun fully illuminated the lake, its golden light reflecting across the calm water. Clara and Ethan sat on a fallen log, shoulders brushing occasionally in ways that were comforting rather than overwhelming. They spoke of dreams yet unfulfilled, of little joys they had long ignored, and of the quiet moments that made life worth noticing. Clara noticed how natural it felt to share these thoughts, how easy it was to connect without pretense, and how rare it was to find someone who could understand without judgment. She realized that the solitude she had come seeking had been enriched, transformed by the presence of someone who could share it with her without. Breaking at times seemed to slow as they lingered by the lake, the gentle sounds of nature providing a soft soundtrack to their connection. Clara watched the sunlight dance across the water, feeling the warmth not only on her skin but within her heart. She understood now that being watched did not always mean intrusion. Sometimes it meant attention, care, and quiet admiration. Ethan's presence had taught her that connection could exist in gentle ways, that the heart could open gradually, without force or rush, and that intimacy could be nurtured in silence as much as in words. Her mind wandered to the small wooden box he had brought days before, still unopened. She realized it symbolized patience and trust, the kind of bond that grows slowly, naturally, and respectfully. By midday, Clara knew the time to leave was approaching. She rose from the log, brushing off leaves, and Ethan mirrored her movement, his calm demeanor a steady comfort. They walked back to the cabin, the air filled with the subtle sounds of the forest, their steps creating a quiet rhythm that matched the unspoken understanding between them. As they reached the cabin porch, Ethan turned to her, his eyes holding the same gentle warmth that had drawn her to him from the start. "I hope you'll come back," he said softly. Clara smiled, feeling her chest tighten in a pleasant, tender way. "I will," she replied, knowing in her heart that this was not a fleeting encounter but the beginning of something enduring. Quiet yet profound, the drive back to Boston was reflective and calm. Clara thought about the weekend, about the forest, the lake, and the gentle, patient presence of Ethan. She realized that solitude was valuable, but the right connection could transform it into something far richer. She replayed their conversations, the way his smile had made her feel seen, the way silence had become a shared space rather than an emptiness. Her heart felt lighter, freer, and more open to the possibilities of life, love, and understanding. When she returned to her apartment, the city seemed different, louder, faster, yet less oppressive. Clara carried the memory of the lake, the forest, and Ethan with her, letting it serve as a quiet sanctuary she could access anytime she needed calm. She thought about the weekend not just as an escape, but as an awakening. A gentle reminder that life often provides exactly what we need when we are open to noticing it. The connection she had experienced was subtle, romantic, and deeply emotional, and she knew it would continue to influence her life in ways both quiet and profound. That night, as she lay in bed, Clara reflected on everything she had felt. The longing for solitude, the unexpected presence of someone who noticed without intruding, and the gentle bond that had formed between them. All of it left her heart full and hopeful. She understood that life was not about rushing toward love or connection, but about allowing moments to unfold naturally, patiently, and gracefully. The memory of Ethan waiting by the lake, quietly observing, patient and kind, lingered in her mind like a soft glow. She closed her eyes, feeling the warmth of possibility, and drifted into sleep with a sense of calm, trust, and quiet joy that she had not felt in years. When morning came, Clara promised herself that she would return, not just to the cabin, but to the space she had discovered within herself, the balance between solitude and connection, between quiet and intimacy, between longing and fulfillment. She knew that life, in all its complexity, had a way of bringing the right people into our worlds at the right time. And sometimes, even when we seek to be alone, the universe conspires to place someone exactly where we need them most. Clara smiled as she packed her last belongings, feeling a deep sense of gratitude and hope. The weekend had changed her, not in grand dramatic ways, but in quiet, lasting, meaningful ways that she would carry forward, like a gentle current beneath the surface of her everyday life. As she walked away from the cabin one last time, the lake sparkling in the early morning light, Clara felt a connection not only to Ethan but to herself, to the stillness and to the quiet, patient beauty of life itself. She understood that love, companionship, and understanding could arrive softly, without fanfare, and yet leave a profound mark on the heart. And somewhere by the lake, Ethan waited quietly, patiently, with the same gentle smile that had first drawn her in. A reminder that the most meaningful connections often appear when we least expect them, quietly transforming our lives in ways we never imagined. This is part 4, expanded to 1,000 words. Fast-paced, emotionally rich, clean, and fully YouTube monetization safe, giving a satisfying, romantic, and heartfelt conclusion to the story. If you want, I can now create 5 YouTube-optimized titles and 5 thumbnail texts for the full story to maximize clicks and engagement. Do you want me to do that next?